If I were picking like the opposite of driver of the day, it would be George Russell. I do not understand what George was thinking and why Mercedes allowed it to happen. Basically, the situation that we were in was that Kimi Antonelli was ahead of George Russell and that George Russell was under pressure from Oscar Piastri. As Kimi Antonelli was chasing Ollie Behrman, hoping to end up on the podium himself, George Russell was crashing out over the radio for an extreme amount of time, cursing and demanding that their cars were swapped so that he could ultimately chase Ollie Behrman himself. George was certain that he had more pace than Kimi Antonelli had, and genuinely, after an extreme number of censored radio messages where he talked about Oscar Piastri and a McLaren up his butt, somehow Mercedes does agree to swap these positions. And I truly don't understand why. George at this point really was so beyond any normal type of behavior, even beyond George's normal type of behavior. I don't know why he was so intense about it. I don't know why he was so vulgar about it. And I don't know what possessed him to think that he knew better than the team themselves. At one point, when he says he can catch Ollie Behrman, he's told that he's free to pass Kimi Antonelli whenever he can do so on his own. But obviously, he ends up under pressure from Oscar and personally doesn't want to be there. So what he does instead is kill both of their races. He gets those team orders, and Kimi ends up having all of the pressure from Oscar. And Kimi does manage to defend Oscar quite a bit in that situation, but George does not get anywhere close to passing Ollie Behrman. The requirement for the swap does cost both of these cars time, and does end up putting Kimi Antonelli in a situation that when everybody pitted to go for a two-stop strategy, Oscar overtakes him in the pit lane. At that point, Kimi Antonelli's race is sacrificed, and not only does George not pass Ollie Behrman, but this back and forth ends up giving Oscar a chance to pass not only Kimi Antonelli, but George also. And I think that this was a moment that not only really affected the Mercedes races, but also really affects the championship standings. Oscar ends up 2 positions ahead of where he could have been had George listened to Mercedes and allowed them to run whatever strategy it was that they wanted to run. Instead, in all of this chaos, in every second counting, Oscar ends up ahead, which are points that are very necessary for his championship battle. He ultimately doesn't end up passing Ollie Behrman, but how much further back would Oscar have been had he really had to fight for both of those Mercedes passes? Ultimately, this was probably the most frustrating part of the race to me. I was really frustrated for Kimi, I was really irritated by George, and I was really confused as to why Mercedes decided to lean in and just allow George to have what he was asking for, especially when he wasn't asking for it in any way that was sportsmanlike at all. And ultimately, he does give the position back to Kimi, but at that point, it's already affected their race so strongly that Kimi can't really do anything for the rest of the race that would actually make a difference. Kimi, I am proud of for actually saying instantly, as soon as George came out and was behind Oscar, let's swap the positions back. I'm glad he stood up for himself. It was very important, but ultimately, it just sucks that we don't know what his race would have been had this not happened.